i.e., that means the state of Delaware, the state of New Jersey, state of Pennsylvania, state of North Carolina, state of California, etc. All of these are defunct, bankrupt, or subcategory or de facto political platforms, separate from and not to be confused with the aggregate physical land, which you have been falsely told that they are. They have no lawful aggregate land or what was called territorial jurisdiction. That's a fact. And they've been using the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, the driver's licenses, etc., to back their private debt of the clergy and the popes of Rome and the private slush funds of the board of directors that you have been knowing as congressmen and senators and mayors and governors, etc., of the states of corporations, with the help of their Roman Curia operative members known as the clergy, whose oath I read to you in the Secret Treaty of Verona. And as a reminder of you all who are listening tonight, go back to the congressional records, read Article 3. So that's all your clergy. So if you say, oh no, I'm Protestant and I'm not this and I'm not that, all of them have this secret oath. They all come under the Vatican. And all the corporate entities come under the Vatican. That's a fact. Do your research. However, we're informing you so that you can, by your own will, start rejecting Rome and start, how you might say, loving Allah, loving Jesus, etc., loving the prophets like you've been claiming to do, and start rejecting Rome, who's actually been using humans as collateral to back their private corporate debt. However, their political platform is bankrupt. It has much to do with the political reflections that you see taking place now at North America and reflected around the world. That's a fact, not an opinion. Be aware.
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
This is from Laurel Rael. Can a man file a notice of claim on his wife and children to override any claim? And then and also, let's add the other. If we
one
create,
question at a time.
What's the same person? It's the same.
It's still one question at a time.
Okay.
Because it blends.
All right.
Because remember, questions are actually involve a lot of other people. This is the position. Now, divinely, morally, of course. However, politically, the condition of the being stated as a ward of the state that every man, woman, and child must confess their own. The condition of the child is condition of the mother. I would encourage you to have the mother or herself, she must honor her mothers and fathers as you have. Because in law and at law, the honor of or the right of a state and liberties, etc., and inheritances, this is relative to heritability, it must be confessed by the being themselves. You can't confess it for her. Unfortunately, that is in fact an ancient rule. And so when you're talking about what is known as the common law and common sense, etc., you must assume also that in according to assumed jurisdiction, that she is, as you would say, your wife, etc., that wifery, if it's based in the marriage certificate, the jurisdictional claim is already abdicated unless you reverse that also. And this is back to why over the years we've been encouraging people to understand and comprehend the meaning, political meaning of nationalization, which is more expansive than most people are told it is. For it is in its nature an actual reversion of a state. And anyone by law who fails to profess, or what can be said from a law position, a status position, to profess or to pronounce it or to proclaim publicly the honor of their mothers and fathers, have by rule of political operations abandoned their right of estate. And this is also what they're operating on. So keep in mind the instruments, i.e., the marriage certificates, they're all de facto. However, from an assumed jurisdictional position, you must rebut them publicly. And I would suggest that you look at that area while making that claim, etc. Because it's sort of like from a rule of status, you can't liberate a being who themselves don't want to be liberated. They have a right to be in servitude if they choose to. And because in another way, you can kind of look at, for those of you who are familiar with the Septuaginta or the Bible, which comes from old African law, even though the hybrid Europeans have tampered with it, there still are books. Keep that in mind. Not just the Quran and the Torah. The Bible is also our books. That's still Berber culture. That's African culture. And the principles, the moral principles that are rooted in that Bible are African culture. And so the principle of right of inheritance is that every man, woman, and child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. In a principle of political operations, that position of that honor is a right of inheritance. And absent of that honor, the being or the otherwise heir has no right of inheritance. That area is where the hybrid Europeans have been claiming what you would call abandonment, and the wardship tenures operations via their operations of cheat, which is really what they've been doing. And this is again why they don't teach trust law, because our people aren't even aware that the United States Corporation Company and its operatives who have been pretending to be a government, a legitimate government, when they're actually illegitimate, and they're in imposter operations. They've been declaring that particularly the people, the Aboriginal people of the land, have abandoned their estates by claiming to be Negroes, blacks, and coloreds, which have nothing to do with the pedigree or the history of Asiatic African people, but were indeed nom de guerre brand systems set forth by hybrid Europeans operating under colonial powers at North America and presenting these nom de guerre tags or quote unquote brands as identities. And by the people not rebutting them, assumed jurisdiction was established for the record, which is why they refer collectively to such persons having no birthright as quote unquote people of color. Now, for those of you who have been tricked by so-called conscious people in your community, telling you that people of color is sort of like a statement that gives honor to African people of descent or African descent, let me go to law and show you what they know, what they have not been telling you. Let me just take a moment and go to Dr. G's library, and this is just a small part of it. But I want you to wait. I want you to see the shirt.
They can't see it.
Oh well. Anyway, so let me go into the law book, and
unfortunately,
that's fine.
We'll figure it out.
So we're sharing. Now, this would be not just the current, but keep in mind past tense, because remember, jurisprudence is the science that treats of positive law, coming from the ancient Sabian or Sabian Moors, and Almoravids and Almoravides, etc., and the different Moorish tribes of Iberia. And Iberia is later known to you in history as Europe, etc. So let's go into the ancient and modern principle of people of color, so that you will have a clear conception of what it actually means, contrary to what you've been falsely told by so-called persons that you've trusted, referred to as people of color. But I want to show you, but before we go, I want to show you my House of Reawakening Mind shirt.
We'll put up the picture.
Yes. And my custom crown the brother made for me.
Oh yeah.
Hooey.
All right.
All right.
We'll put it up.
So many of you have been trained under what is known as nom de guerre. And so when you hear people making statements like, people of color. Many of you thought that was a term of endearment for people of African descent, when in fact it is in fact anti-human, and in fact a political term constructively applied to people of Northwest Africa, Northwest of Mexico, the Temple of the Moon and Sun, known to you as North America, etc., under the political jurisdiction operations of the United States Service Corporation Company, operating under the secret treaty of Verona for the Bishopric of Rome and the Vatican, to which they are fidelity operatives, etc. So here's what color actually means in law when they make reference to humans, etc. Color is an appearance, a semblance, or a simulacrum, as distinguished from that which is real, a prima facie or apparent right, hence a deceptive appearance, a plausible assumed exterior concealing a lack of reality, a disguise or pretext. Now I'm going to go into colored persons. Law. Black's Law Dictionary of Ancient and Modern Jurisprudence. This rule is ancient and it is modern. The law principle did not change. It still stands today. Colored. This is page 332. Colored. By common usage in America, this term, as used in such phrases as quote unquote colored persons, quote unquote the colored race, quote unquote colored men, and the like, is used to designate Negroes or persons of the African race, including all persons of mixed blood descended from Negro ancestry. And then it gives you law case for reference. But where the state constitution provided for separate schools for the white and colored races, the term quote unquote white race was held to be limited to the Caucasian race, and the term quote unquote colored races to embrace all others. And then it gives you case reference such as Rice versus Gonlum, etc. 139, Mississippi. Now, the term colored people, colored persons, colored men, colored race, it also has been held that there is no legal, technical signification to the phrase quote unquote colored person, which the courts are bound judicially to know. So as you can see, it is a fraud and it has been totally misrepresented to our people. And when you have so-called conscious people promoting among your children, i.e., we're people of color, they have just called you an artificial person, i.e., or corporate entity, thus civiliter mortuus, i.e., among the dead. That's why Prophet Noble Ali said you're not Negro, black, or colored people. And this is why he talked from a sociological perspective, not from an etymological perspective, when he says black, according to science, means death. And so you're talking about the political science of social engineering operating at North America under the principles of occupation or birthright theft. And thus, they've been living off your virtues for generations. And this is why miseducation is so important as a political tool to affect a political foundation that the corporate state operatives and owners can escheat your estate. Thus, that's why in the Christian Black Codes of 1724, adopted into all the states, 1868, etc., why the condition of the children or the condition of the mother. Therefore, all women should know the truth of the political platforms that they've been supporting blindly, including all the clergy who actually have fidelity to the popes of Rome, not to Jesus, and that we have been funding our own slavery. And the marriage bottomry instrument is one of those instruments. That's a fact. Unfortunate, but true. However, you can honor your mothers and fathers, but you're going to have to reject Rome. And another thing, that for those of you who are familiar with the Bible, you can look at Isaiah 64 in that area and read that. In the area where it says, I hold my hand out all the day long to a hard-hearted and rebellious people who are not called by my name. When they repent from their sinful ways, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Land. Go to your law books and look up land and see how extensive it is, which would include all of your estates and all your rights of inheritances, corporal and incorporeal, and thus your right of claim to your own property and your offspring, i.e., your seed, your children. You must step out of Rome's venues and out of Rome's political jurisdiction back into your own. On a political civil level that covers that whole area of political operations is called universally nationalization. It is far more than most people have been telling you who have been mentioning the word nationalization. And it also is important for you to comprehend, understand, and overstand and understand the nature of it, so that you can counter opportunists on your side who have been trying to get into people's pockets relative to your rights of estate or reversion of estate, or some false claim of debt coming from the IRS or any of the Pope's instrumentalities of defunct and bankrupt, wrongfully operating criminal organizations under the United States Corporation Company or its states of operatives and entities, etc., claiming or cheating the estates of the people, including any taxation whatsoever. And these areas is what you should be dealing with and starting to study to relieve the birthright theft of the people's estates that have been actually being extorted from you under human trafficking. That's the reality. And part of the claims that they've been making, jurisdictional body claims, and thus later souls and organ claims, etc., which they've also been stealing people's organs under the so-called driver's license, etc., and bonding them for future death and organ transfers, etc. And they've made a business out of that too, etc., with that marriage certificate and the driver's license. So don't think that these people have anything to do with divinity. They are absolutely, positively, and provably human traffickers. That's a fact. And the concepts that our people have had to the contrary are actually juvenile and unfortunately naive. I think that answered the brother's questions earlier.
I guess. Let me see if there's another question. I think there was. The other part of the question was also, if we create our own jurisdiction and natural birth centers, wouldn't it solve and override any claim they have via their adhesion contract?
Of course. Now, and this is back to why over the years, although under normal circumstances, it would not be something that we would need to do because it wouldn't have been necessary. This is again why we've been promoting for years to people to start study classes in the different territories at North America, particularly, and activating the pre-existing courts of diversity that are lawfully constructed around the world. That is your consular venues to get the people into the practice and exercising of intelligent jurisprudence operations to issue from your own political venues lawfully with established law, etc., your instrumentalities to any persons, groups of persons, or anyone representing any agency claiming jurisdiction on the lives and the bodies of the people. That would include the International Monetary Fund, United States corporation operatives, the IRS, the United Nations, or any other entity which are really octopus arms of the bankrupt United States corporation company that many of its agents are still operating at North America in violation of both Constitution, violation of treaty, and violation of international law, still doing human trafficking and extorting from the people, knowing that many people don't know that they are indeed human traffickers and are actually a criminal enterprise with all of its operators, and that include all the governors, etc., who have been pretending to be officers or under constitutional operations when actually they are operatives under defunct, de facto, expired, and bankrupt United States corporation company, and still operating their pledges to the popes of Rome under the secret Treaty of Verona against a unknowing, unsuspecting, and uninformed general public. That's a fact.
All right, other comments. Okay, what is reversion of the estate, and how do we?
Version of estate is basically when you rebut any claims made by the de facto operators who have been claiming to be quote unquote the government or your government, both of which are false statements and lies. However, it is important that you, your family members, your friends start studying and becoming competent and being in harmony with established law, etc., yourselves, and start taking control of your estate. So reversion of estate in its nature is really you claiming the birthright or claiming your right of estate. And as an example, many of you over the years, for the last 25 or 30 years, and some of you listening aren't even that old, but we've been teaching this to people for quite some time. This is what you would call a reversioner's statement in its nature. This would be the nature of a reversion of estate. As an example, if you did a writ, writ just means writing, and you would say, what is your appellation? So you would say, I, and place your appellation, the living sentient man or woman and rightful heir, am not lost at sea. And I affirm and I declare my right of quote unquote reversion of estate. And therefore I make no claim with respect to the title and misrepresented name or man of straw and nom de guerre being a title, which is and which consists of the all caps instruments that are presented on bills, instruments, debts, etc., licenses, marriage licenses, all the other instrumentalities. I reject them, and the spurious, and they are the spurious creations of the foreign, de facto United States corporate operatives, actors, and owners. And I surrender and assign any and all reversionary interest to the foreign United States and to its subsidiaries for full, quote unquote, acquittance, discharge, settlement. and closure, quote unquote, of my reliance on Title 12, United States Code, subcategory of subtitle 95A, Part 2. And I assume no liabilities and I assume no debts, however contrived, among its associates, and I do not consent to, nor do I stand as surety, quote unquote, for the foreign, private, and for profit United States Incorporated, U.S. corporation company entity owners, its directors, or their administrators or administrative clerks, nor do I stand as surety for its subsidiaries or its associates at any point or any moment in time. That would be a reversioner estate statement in general. And that would cover all false taxation, all claims of over your body, all the Christian black codes operative where they've been claiming people's children under state wardship, which is really for their human trafficking, which has been going on for quite some time, etc. So in a public record, if you make public response, the most important thing to be cognizant of in relation to reversion of estate and right of estate is that it must be proclaimed publicly. That's the major issue.
And where would one file that?
You don't need to file. We need to see the file. This is the point. People's concepts, and I comprehend that because you're used to filing things thinking that they're legitimate. You give them what you would call notice, lawful notice. So it wouldn't be a file. That the filing would be, that's how you respond to them. And you keep a record and you make it public. That's the only.
So when they make a claim against you,
because that's what they're doing. They're making claims of a debt that is theirs, converting it to you. And then they're operating that if you don't respond or rebut that you've abandoned your estate, then they use their de facto human trafficking venues that are not Article 3 courts, but they've been telling people they're courts, and they've been actually using them to enforce false claims on people because they're making claims against your estate. Remember, when they send you any instrument that says you owe them anything, that's a claim against estate. You must make a counterclaim by rebutting their claim. You might look at like if as far as say for instance, if you're talking about proper venue, right, by which a claim should be heard, then that would be what is known as a mandamus, right? If you're rebutting their claim of authority over yourself or your estate, that would be a quo warranto. Also, it would be an averment of jurisdiction. So put these three things on your venue for study. An averment of jurisdiction, one. A mandamus, that would be relative to the venue, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, a quo warranto. And that would be a writ commanding them produce by what authority they're operating. And of course, they cannot produce it because they are really impersonating. So they will never properly answer it, which would show you that they actually never had jurisdiction. This is again why many people among you who you've been thinking wanting to help you, except claiming to be conscious, etc., will try to get in your pockets, etc., rather than tell you the truth that these people are really human traffickers, that they're defunct, and that the fundamentals with all our people, we should learn to rebut the claims of Rome. And the more your people do it, they'll not be able to sell the bonds on the stock market, which is really what they've been monetizing by our people not making their right of claim or nationalizing, and therefore assume that they've abandoned their estate and they've been building more instruments on that and sending them to Seed and Company, 55 Water Street, and backing their debt as security, their private debt, pretending to be government. The problems that they have, and as the nations of the earth have been rejecting U.S. Treasury bonds, and that's why you have this trade problems now and all this stuff that's going on. Know that is in fact directly tied to this conversation directly.
Okay, here's another comment. I can't pronounce her. Anyway, marriage is a contract with the state. My mate and I tried to change our names before we knew it wasn't necessary, and was told we would have to remarry in order for him to take my L that I had.
All right, now you're talking about in personam jurisdiction. You write them a rebuttal. And this is I did a short book for people to study. It's called Nomen Substantivum. And that's to let you know that your right of claim of a name correction or change is a divine right and supersedes any claim made by the state. They didn't tell you that part though, did they? We'll talk about that later. That's a fact. That's law.
And because there's an instance in the Bible where I forget his name, but he changed his name because his name meant pain, and he was causing pain, and he just changed his name to something that had a different meaning.
Yeah.
So if you go to that scripture,
casting spells.
That's right. All right.
And see, even the question indicates the assumption that they have jurisdiction. You see where the psychology is? See, the deal of it is when you apply to them, you're giving them jurisdiction over your estate. They have none lawfully. However, under forfeitureship, or what you call trust law, when you assign to them, it's actually they're dealing with your estate by you just assigning them verbally to your estate by trust. That's why they don't teach trust law or trust principles, all of which our subject matter is tonight. You got to, you know how they say Satan has no power except what you give him? Translated into common civic order, the corporate state and the Roman Curia members have no jurisdiction except you keep applying to them and assuming that they have jurisdiction. Then they assume it. And then when they do, you always lose.
Okay. So, Atiti Asha says, how do you get out of rapid antigen testing from work? What instrument would I need?
You would do a reversion of a statement in the same nature.
With regard to the